Hey there, Mega Maniacs. This is Mr. Mega Man Fan with the Retro Hunting Adventures, and today we are looking at some of my recent pickups on Super Famicom. A wide variety of different things, 5 different games in all, covering all different genres and types of games, starting with Fire Pro Wrestling Joshi All Stars, or as the copy SNES translates it, Women's Pro Wrestling. Well, Joshi is women's pro wrestling in Japan, whatever Joshi you follow, whether it's Ice Women or Tokyo Joe Pro or whatever, it's women's wrestling. So I guess if you want to call Joshi women's wrestling, that's fine. But Joshi is a completely different style from what we in North America would call women's wrestling. Probably closer to Lucha Libre, but a lot more hard hitting. And some of your favorite wrestlers in AEW, WWE, Ring of Honor would be veterans of the Joshi wrestling scene in Japan. People like Asuka, Io Shirai, Riho, etc., etc. Of course, the legendary Meiko Satomura is the NXT UK Women's Champion as I record this. Probably, if not the greatest, right up there with Bull Nakano and legends of that stature. So as you can see, it's a tested and working game. So I'm going to go ahead and dump it with copy SNES so I can play it anytime I want without necessarily having to have the cartridge inserted into the analog Super NT. I can just dump it right to the SD card and have it when I want it. The full title of this game, by the way, is Fire Pro Wrestling All-Star Dream Slam. And I got this one for only $1 from my favorite eBay sellers, so obviously it was a large print run and or not super in demand these days, especially for exporting to the United States because it's in Japanese, but because it's a Fire Pro Wrestling game, I'm reasonably confident that I'll be able to play it without any sort of translation required. And if it was absolutely necessary, now that I've dumped it, I could go to romhacking.net, find a patch it, and Bob's your uncle. And that's the great thing about having this kind of setup, is you can import games, and if they're not in English, you can patch them to English if there's a patch available. Romhacking.net is a wonderful resource for that sort of thing. Let's move on to our next game, though, shall we? I picked it because of the price, which was $1, but have to admit I knew absolutely nothing about it going in, whether it would be an RPG, a platformer, or what. This one is called Hanjuku Hero. According to Wikipedia, it's a Japanese exclusive series. Well, no shit, really. Strategy video games directed by Takashi Takeda, published by Square Enix, with 4 main titles and a spin-off game, starting with Hanjuku Hero in 1988, which would be too early for this. So let's see which one this would be. Looks like this one is Hanjuku Hero A Sekyo Hanjukunari, which translates loosely to Let the World Become Soft-Boiled. The egg monsters featured in this game are parodies of characters for Final Fantasy IV, and the game was re-released for the WonderSwan in 2002 and iOS in 2017. So apparently, pretty popular game. They brought it back a couple of times, even if they've never localized it for the United States. The egg thing seems to be a running theme in this series. It's weird. I don't know if it translates from Japanese to English. It may be a cultural thing, but it dumps easily enough, so I'll look for an English language patch and see if I can get a little further into it. Probably going to have more luck playing this Super Famicom one than I would the PlayStation 2 or the mobile phone iterations of this game. Those probably don't have patches and or would be completely indecipherable. But we're moving on to our next game, which is Muscle Kinikoman. And if you thought there were plenty of games in the Hanjuku Hero series, boy, you got another thing coming with this one, because the Muscle series, wow, there are a lot of entries. This one is called Muscle Kinikoman Dirty Challenger. What's so dirty? I have no idea. But if we look it up online, we can find a few hints about how to play it. Giant Bomb has an overview. Kinikoman Dirty Challenger is a wrestling game published by Yutaka, developed by a developer for hire based on the Kinikoman license, known in the West as Ultimate Muscle. The player can select between 6 wrestlers in single-player story mode, with an additional secret 2 characters that can be unlocked. Now, for whatever reason, when I tried to dump this one, it didn't have a header with the name of the game. Almost every one I've ever dumped with Copy SNES does. And it's pretty reliable, more so than the Copy NES on Analog Mini NT Noir V2. I'm trying not to complain too much about that, but you have to pick a different mapper for almost every game, whereas Copy SNES just seems to figure it out automatically. But in this case, it couldn't figure out anything. I had to enter the name myself, but at least it worked. Almost everything I've ever dumped with Copy SNES has worked except for Rockman X3, which apparently had a bad header when Capcom developed it, and it's just screwed up like that, and it's like impossible to dump normally, and I don't know what special procedures you would need to get around that. So eventually I just found it by alternate means and considered that my dump. Moving on, this game will be fairly obvious to most of you, but if you're new to Super Donkey Kong, it's actually Donkey Kong Country in North America. So this is Super Donkey Kong 2, aka Donkey Kong Country 2. Basically the same game with a few minor language changes, maybe a few difficulty changes, but nothing that I'm aware of, obviously, from playing it right here for this video. So I'll have to go to something like the cutting room floor and do a little deeper dive to find out if there are any significant differences or things that would make this version preferable for a speedrunner, because I know in a lot of cases people will play the Super Famicom version of a game for speedrunning over the Super Nintendo one just because it came out there first and is somehow more optimized. Either the kanji characters are shorter and load faster so you can speed through cutscenes, or it just has little glitches that they patched out when they localized it to North America, and the glitches make it easier to speedrun the game. But we move on from dumping this one and test out the actual ROM itself. Now, it said it saved both the ROM and the RAM, but I don't seem to have the best luck with that when it comes to Copy SNES. Suppose if I had to complain about anything other than Rockman X3 not dumping properly, it would be the fact that it said it saved the RAM, but then when I go in and open the game in the Copy SNES folder, it doesn't show the saved games. Like, it created a RAM save file, but look, there's no saved games here. So what am I doing wrong? Something. I'm not sure what. Maybe I'll take those files off the micro SD card and try them in an emulator and see if it shows up that way. But for our final game, Ultimate Football? I didn't know that there were North American style football games in Japan, but apparently the Sammy Corporation said, why not? We've got enough soccer games. Let's do an actual football game, North American style football. And everything here seems to be a parody of the NFL. They call it the Ultimate Football League, or UFL. We got a bunch of made up team names, and it plays just like what you would expect a normal NFL Super Famicom Super Nintendo game to play, just without an NFL license or NFL players. That would be kind of a fun walk down memory lane if it actually had the rosters from the 90s of teams like the Bears, the Lions, the Giants, etc. I would enjoy seeing some of those old players back again, but I guess I'll have to play a Super Tecmo Bowl game if I really want to do that. But let's go ahead and dump it, make sure that the Copy SNES creates the right file, and try it again, and make sure we have a working game. Bob's your uncle. There we go. So all 5 of these games worked. Got to thank the seller from Japan for once again providing 5 games for $5. That looks like there will be a lot of fun to be had here. I'm Mr. Mega Man Fan. Thanks as always for watching.